Bob, we've just learned that the sheriff has been booked until the Elkhart County Jail, the Indiana State Police being the arresting agency on that. Now, in those documents, it alleges that the sheriff agreed to accept $40,000 from Kevin Bronson, who is an inmate in the Kosciuszko County Jail. Now, in exchange, court documents say the sheriff gave Bronson special privileges, like having unrecorded phone conversations and unsupervised visits. Court documents allege that the sheriff was giving Bronson those privileges with Dr. Mark Soto. According to a tort claim, Bronson has had long stints in prison. He was a member of a white supremacist organization and also had abused drugs in the past. In that same tort claim, Dr. Mark Soto had served as Bronson's mentor, counselor, and helped him with financial responsibilities. Both of them were also indicted by the grand jury. Now, these records allege that Rovenstine also threatened a Warsaw police officer who started a criminal investigation into Bronson's conduct while he was incarcerated here at the Kosciuszko County Jail. Now, since this involved the Kosciuszko County Sheriff, a special prosecutor over in Marshall County was appointed to handle this case. Now, certainly a lot of unanswered questions here, especially was Sheriff Rovenstine, how was he involved with these two men? And also, if there are more people possibly involved, certainly lots of questions. We still have a lot of answers to be told. Now, right now, Indiana State Police are not answering many of those questions, but we're told that they might coming up at a press conference at 3 o'clock over in Marshall County. That's where we're headed right now, though. Certainly lots of questions still need to be answered. Bob?
Suzanne, I know you're going to be front and center in this particular press conference this afternoon. You'll have the very latest first report. Thanks very much.
Rick, it's called a report and recommendation. Special Prosecutor Nelson Chipman asked that it be open to the public, but the judge decided against that. The prosecutor told a room full of Indiana State Police detectives and the media what's in that report is of extreme importance to the public. He went on to say it's highly unusual that something like this is not released. This investigation, though, boils down to Sheriff Aaron Rovenstine and two others. Rovenstine was indicted for bribery, intimidation, assisting a criminal, and official misconduct. Court documents show Rovenstine agreed to accept $40,000 from Kevin Bronson, an inmate in the Kosciuszko County Jail. In exchange, the 55-year-old sheriff allegedly gave Bronson special privileges, like having unrecorded phone conversations and unsupervised visits. According to a tort claim, Bronson has had long stints in prison. He was a member of a white supremacist organization and even in the past had abused drugs. Now, in that same tort claim, Bronson apparently had a mentor relationship with Dr. Mark Soto. He's a local professor at Grace College and has been for quite some time. Both of them also indicted by the grand jury. Indiana State Police began conducting their own investigation into this August of 2015, but today's release of the indictment ends their investigation into this. But questions still remain, especially as into the relationship between the sheriff and these two men. We know that Rovenstine already bonded out of Elkhart County Jail, and so did Soto, but Bronson still remains in the Marshall County Jail. We're digging more into this and what this means for the future of the Kosciuszko County Sheriff at 5. Live in Marshall County, Suzanne Spencer, WSBT 22 News. With a Warsaw Police Department investigation, then an Indiana State Police investigation, culminating with today. Grand jury indictments unsealed since they began deliberating back in December. This boils down to the Kosciuszko County Sheriff and his involvement with two local men, one of whom is Kevin Bronson, an inmate, the other Dr. Mark Soto, who had a mentor relationship with Bronson. Today, a dozen Indiana State Police detectives were there to hear it all. They were called to work this case last August, but the jury's indictment ends their involvement with this, according to an officer. The indictments reveal that Bronson agreed to pay the sheriff nearly $40,000. In exchange, he gave Bronson special privileges, according to court documents, which would be unrecorded phone conversations and unsupervised visits. But the special prosecutor in this said there's something called a report and recommendation that the judge did not unseal, even though the prosecutor called for it.
It would be fair to assume the document contains matters of vital public concern to the citizens of Kosciuszko County. We will seek to have it unsealed through the proper legal channels.
The prosecutor said he intends to work through the legal side of this to get that report unsealed. It's also worth mentioning the indictment alleges that Rovenstine threatened a Warsaw police officer who was investigating Bronson. Bronson and Soto also were indicted in the grand jury decision. As for the future of the Kosciuszko County Sheriff, we stopped into the county administration office. They told us they don't know what happens next. We also shot an email over to the Kosciuszko County Sheriff's Department and have not yet heard back. Live in Marshall County, Suzanne Spencer, WSBT 22 News.
We start with Suzanne Spencer, who broke this story this morning. Suzanne, this has been months in the making.
The Warsaw Police Department began investigating, and then the Indiana State Police conducted its own investigation. But it came down to 6 people on a grand jury. They decided that there was enough evidence that a crime was committed. Now that means that the 3 men were not guilty, that they're saying that they should at least be tried. The indictments are against the sheriff and 2 local men. The documents allege the sheriff agreed to accept $40,000 in exchange for granting special privileges to an inmate. At a news conference, the special prosecutor said the public will want to know what's in documents that are still sealed.
It would be fair to assume the document contains matters of vital public concern to the citizens of Kosciuszko County. We will seek to have it unsealed through the proper legal channels.
Dr. Mark Soto and Kevin Bronson were the other 2 indicted by the grand jury. They're both charged with several counts of intimidation and corrupt business influence. Soto bonded out of jail, and Bronson is still behind bars. A spokesman for the Kosciuszko County Sheriff's Department told me that Rovenstine is still their sheriff. He is active and on duty at this point. What is still unclear, though, is the relationship between Bronson, Soto, and the sheriff, and just how long this has been going on. Live in Marshall County, Suzanne Spencer, WSBT 22 News. The special prosecutor told me it pains him that the public doesn't know about this. He said that yesterday, reiterated it today, but the judge said no. He said what happens in a grand jury is secret. For months, a grand jury debated whether to hand down indictments against these 3 men: Kosciuszko County Sheriff Aaron Rovenstine, inmate Kevin Bronson, and Dr. Mark Soto. The sheriff accused of taking bribes and threatening another police officer. Special prosecutor Nelson Chipman says the grand jury took an unusual step, preparing a message for the community.
They have something to say, and it should be heard by their fellow community.
That report still sealed.
In my experience, it was a rare event for a grand jury to take this step.
A judge has that report. He says all grand jury proceedings are secret and confidential. Defense attorney Stan Rubel says there are lots of possibilities about what's in it.
There could have been targets who later turned out to be innocent bystanders, or names that were brought up and that turned out to be uninvolved in whatever alleged criminal activity occurred.
He says the report likely is some sort of reasoning or information they want the public to know.
Their secrecy is a bit disturbing in that when the public hears someone's been indicted by a grand jury, it gives the impression that that person has been found guilty beyond a reasonable doubt.
While Rovenstine will be tried just like the other 2 men, questions still remain.
It is difficult to deal with the secrecy of a grand jury. So it pains me not to be able to discuss what I know.
The special prosecutor intends to file a motion to try to get that report in the open, but that hasn't happened yet. Jennifer, we checked in with the Attorney General's office, who said it is not investigating Rovenstine at this point. We also left a message for the FBI. Carrying clear plastic bags with computers, iPads, and other electronics. At least one bag I saw had the name Rovenstine on it. We confirmed the evidence collected was the result of a search warrant earlier today. Bags of evidence, but not much to say from these Indiana State Police detectives who have been investigating Sheriff Aaron Rovenstine since last summer. Rovenstine indicted by a grand jury for agreeing to accept $30,000 in bribe money and intimidating another police officer. The investigation showing ties to this man, Kevin Bronson, seen in a YouTube video from 2013.
I rose to national leadership in that gang,
right.
And I stayed part of leadership nationally and on the state level for over 20 years.
Bronson has told police he's a top 7 member of the Aryan Brotherhood, was involved with crime. In 2009, the Warsaw Times-Union did a story on how Bronson was trying to change his ways. The paper talked to Rovenstine about Bronson. I met him in 1996. 6, and I've spent some time with him on and off. I've gotten to know him as a unique individual, the sheriff said. He's strong-willed, but not as bullheaded and as stubborn as he was when I first met him. But now Bronson also finds himself indicted by the grand jury for threatening 2 pastors at Christ Covenant Church in Warsaw. Even before the indictment, he slipped back into trouble. He's awaiting sentencing for a 2014 case where Bronson allegedly forced a Warsaw man to drive him to South Bend to pick up drugs. Documents say he forced the man to withdraw $240. When police got there, they found cocaine on him. Bronson also tied to Dr. Mark Soto. The sheriff allegedly allowed the two to have unsupervised visits and unrecorded phone conversations. I asked Soto's attorney if Soto was manipulated by Bronson. He said, quote, Dr. Soto first met Mr. Bronson at a church where Dr. Soto was preaching in about 1998. Mr. Bronson responded to this spiritual message that day. He went on to say, the evidence regarding Mr. Bronson will be abundantly clear in public proceedings. I also reached out to 2 pastors who were allegedly threatened by Bronson. Hear what they had to say about his involvement at the church on our WSBT mobile app. At the live desk, Suzanne Spencer, WSBT 22 News.